public school funding formula is how the state determines how to dole out the state money to each of the individual schools and districts.
Right, and make it as even as they can, regardless of what size of the district. Correct.
Representative Rubel, public education and funding has been such a high priority for your caucus for so long. What's your take on the reconfiguring of the public school funding formula?
Yeah, I'm really concerned at what we're seeing now, and I guess, you know, we could kind of see it coming because of what Representative Yamamoto just mentioned. When the $330 million was promised to be put into K-12 education following the work of Reclaim Idaho and the Quality Education Act and all that, I really kept grilling the governor's office and said, you know, promise me this is going to be truly new money and that there's not going to be a shell game here where we see $330 million put in here, but some more snuck out on the back end so that we're not really coming out $330 million ahead. I don't blame the governor's office for this, but I think, unfortunately, this is kind of where we've ended up. It's come out lately that now, in fact, there isn't really going to be $330 million new money put in. It's going to end up being only $215 million new money put in because we're going to lose $115 million by virtue of going back to that average daily attendance. I think it's really important going forward that we move permanently to an enrollment model. Schools budget based on how many kids are enrolled in the school. They don't get to pay a teacher less because a couple kids are homesick for the week. You know, they have to make their plans based on who told them they're going to be there for the year. And to dock the schools essentially pay based on who, you know, got sick, who didn't turn up, whatever, who went on a longer vacation with their parents or something, really sticks the schools in a pickle, and we're seeing it result in $115 million shortfall in education funding this year. So I think that's got to get fixed for good and turn to an enrollment model.
Senator Adams, from the Budget Committee perspective, what are your thoughts?
I can't speak for the Budget Committee. I can only speak for myself. You know, the discussion on whether we should do enrollment or attendance-based is, I think it's still ongoing. And a couple years ago, I supported legislation that would make it permanent for enrollment. So I don't think that's, I think that's just something we have to work out between the governor's office and the legislature. I mean, the ballot initiative that talked about $330 million, you know, I already had my gripes about not all that money going where I wanted it to go into K-12. But we also know that money itself is not the only definer of success in education. That's pretty well established. You can throw money at a lot of problems. So I think I think we're changing the structure of the formula because the previous formula didn't work. And sometimes change can be a little uncomfortable. But it's where we have to go, and so let's go.
Representative Rubel, you know, education aside, what else is on your radar for the coming months?
Well, I remain very deeply concerned about the state of healthcare access in Idaho, which we were already a healthcare desert, and then all of these abortion laws started going through, and more and more laws to throw doctors in prison. And I think we are going to be, you know, we've been the fastest growing state, but I am really concerned about whether we're going to be able to maintain our status as an attractive destination and an attractive place for people to remain. We have lost, the state only had 9 fetal maternal medical specialists for those very high-risk pregnancies. We've lost 4 of them in the last 6 months because of our abortion laws. So that's 44% of our maternal medicine specialists gone. I think it was, 73 out of the state's 115 OBGYNs say they are actively planning to leave the state or retire early because of these laws. This session, I think there was a total failure to fix anything. And it's a huge problem. Why would a doctor want to practice in a state where they face 5 years of prison for providing standard medical care, you know, and often saving women who are hemorrhaging, miscarrying? Our laws are so overreaching right now that it's a danger to women's lives, and it's a danger to the availability of medicine in Idaho.
You know, this is a legislature that on the record has been anti-abortion. Yep. And for several years, several decades. Realistically, what are the fixes that you want to see that could make it past this legislature?
Well, if we say we value life, I think that should include women's lives. And right now, the only exception written into Idaho law is where a woman's death is certain. The standard is it must be necessary to prevent death. There was a bill proposed that would have, you know, allowed abortion where necessary to avoid a high probability of death. That was rolled out of hand. And that was very frustrating to me, that women's lives were discounted so much that a high probability of death could not be addressed. I think we need to have at the very bare minimum, far, far more generous allowances for women's health and lives. If a woman's facing permanent paralysis, loss of a body organ, again, 50% chance of death, I think we absolutely need to be allowing abortions in those circumstances. And right now, Idaho law as written does not.
And I do have to mention again that the legislature did not extend the maternal mortality review panel.
Which is very interesting that they didn't. Well, I think we are going to see more women dying under the current situation of our laws. And I guess someone didn't want committees poking in and keeping track of how many women were going to be dying.
Very, very briefly, Representative Yamamoto, before we move on, do you think that there are any versions of that proposal that would make it through your caucus?
I do, and the reason I have some confidence is because I got to talk with Representative Brent Crane just earlier this week. And
State Affairs Chairman.
Yes, and he is not giving up on having the discussions. And I thought that what was promising is that he's acknowledging that maybe we need to have more medical professionals in the room when we're talking about those things, so the definitions of things are clearer and that the language is clear enough that those, if they feel confident, and if we have selected people who the medical community respects and trusts, then when they can sign off on that legislation, I think we have a much better chance in our caucus of moving it through.
Senator Adams, I know that there's a big bill that you have been working on. Can you, we have less than 2 minutes left. Can you tell us about it?
I'll try and squeeze it in there. Okay, so this piece of legislation is called Defend the Guard. It's a national movement driven by veterans. And the concept is that the National Guard is the state's militia.
Don't go overseas.
And Article 1, Section of 8 vests war declaring powers into Congress. But anyone who looks at how the system is running right now knows that the executive branch is who really declares war, and Congress uses the War Powers Act to just stamp and roll. I don't think that you can create a legislation, or you can create a law, whether it's the War Powers Act or the Supremacy Clause, that allows the federal government to abdicate, Congress itself to abdicate its constitutional requirements. We have. The National Guard has a handful of requirements that their mission is to repel invasion, suppress insurrection, and enforce the laws of the Union. You can't do any of those in Syria. You can't do any of those in Germany or Ukraine or anywhere except for the United States, unless Congress has declared war and they can activate the Guard. We haven't done that since World War II. And this,
you're in it for the education,
I'll just leave it at that, because this piece of legislation is going to be coming in the Senate. It's gained a lot of support, and it is grassroots. This is from the folks that have gone over there, have done this country's bidding, and have come back and said it didn't feel right. It didn't feel just. There was a process that was missing there.
And we're going to have to leave it there, but we will continue to follow this issue. All three of you, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching. It's our final episode of the season, but as always, we'll continue to report online over the summer.